In the early 2030s, people around the world were living normal lives. Cities were busy. The internet was filled with news and gossip, and most people never looked up at the stars except to admire their beauty. But one quiet night, something unusual happened. In a small observatory in Chile, a group of scientists picked up a strange repeating signal from space. At first, it seemed like background noise, just random radio waves that came and went. But then one of the scientists, Dr. Elena Vargas, noticed a pattern. It wasn't random at all. It was repeating in perfect intervals like a heartbeat. She leaned closer to the screen, eyes wide. "Wait," she whispered. "This isn't natural." The signal was short, sharp, and rhythmic, echoing across the speakers in the room. Beep, beep, beep. Pause. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded mechanical, purposeful, almost desperate. The other scientists gathered around, their coffee forgotten, their chatter fading into silence. They listened as the sound played again and again, from a direction far beyond any known satellite or probe. They recorded it, analyzed it, and tried to find its origin. The coordinates pointed to a region of space near a distant star system that had no known planets or activity. There were no human-made objects there. That meant only one thing. The signal wasn't coming from Earth. At first, no one wanted to believe it. Space is full of strange noises, bursts of radiation and random waves that can easily fool even the best technology. But the signal didn't stop. It repeated every 8 hours, exactly the same each time. Soon, other observatories around the world confirmed it. From Japan to Germany to the United States, scientists everywhere began picking up the same message. The world's media caught wind of it. News headlines flashed, "Mysterious signal from deep space." People were excited, scared, and curious. Social media exploded with theories. Some said it was aliens. Others said it was a hoax. A few thought it was the government testing secret technology. But Dr. Vargas and her team stayed calm. They had one mission, to find the truth. Dr. Vargas was not a dreamer by nature. She was a practical woman who believed in facts, data, and evidence. But as she listened to the signal night after night, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was a cry for help. The pattern reminded her of distress signals used by ships at sea, simple, repeated, and urgent. She began calling it the SOS. She gathered an international team of experts, linguists, mathematicians, and computer engineers. They worked for months to decode the signal. It wasn't a language they recognized, but the repetition suggested intention. Someone, or something, had sent it for a reason. By mid-2033, the team had gathered enough data to begin forming theories. The signal carried a specific mathematical structure that couldn't occur naturally. It used prime numbers and geometric sequences, patterns known to represent intelligence in universal communication. This was the proof Dr. Vargas needed. She presented her findings to the United Nations Science Council. Standing before a crowded hall, she explained how the signal showed signs of intelligent origin. Some laughed, some frowned, but many listened carefully. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "If this signal is what we think it is, someone out there is trying to reach us, and they might need our help." The council debated for days. Some countries wanted to ignore it, fearing it could be dangerous. Others saw it as the greatest discovery in human history. Finally, the UN decided to launch an official investigation, creating the Global Deep Space Response Initiative, the first joint effort of its kind. For months, scientists around the world tuned their telescopes to the same coordinates, gathering every piece of data they could. The signal never changed. It was steady, patient, as if waiting for someone to answer. Meanwhile, ordinary people on Earth began to dream again. Children asked their parents about life beyond the stars. Artists painted what they imagined the senders looked like. Musicians created songs inspired by the mysterious beeps. Even those who didn't believe in aliens couldn't help but feel something special was happening. But for Dr. Vargas, the experience was deeply personal. Late at night, when the others had gone home, she would sit in the dim observatory, headphones on, eyes closed, listening. The beeps echoed softly, filling the room with an eerie rhythm. "Who are you?" she would whisper. "What happened to you?" Then one evening a breakthrough came. A young engineer named Ravi from India noticed that the signal wasn't just sound. It contained faint variations in frequency, like layers hidden beneath the main tone. When they separated those layers, images began to appear on their monitors, fuzzy, distorted, but real. It looked like a planet's surface, rocky landscapes, dark clouds, flashes of lightning. and something that resembled buildings. Everyone stared in shock. The transmission wasn't just noise, and it was a message. Someone had sent a visual record along with the sound, possibly as a plea for help. The images looked ancient, as if they had traveled for centuries across the void. Dr. Vargas felt her heart race. If those images were real, the civilization that sent them might be gone by now. Or worse, they could still be out there, waiting. News spread like wildfire. Humanity had just received its first real evidence of another intelligent species. Governments formed committees, religious leaders made speeches, and conspiracy theorists filled the internet with wild stories. But among all the noise, one truth stood clear. Earth was no longer alone. For the next few years, humanity was divided between belief and doubt. Many people feared what might happen if they replied to the signal. What if it's a trap? They asked. What if they're dangerous? But others argued that ignoring a cry for help would be against everything humanity stood for. Dr. Vargas believed deeply in the second idea. If someone is asking for help, she said in an interview, our duty is to respond. That's what makes us human. Under her leadership, the research continued. Teams worked around the clock to clean and enhance the images from the transmission. Slowly, they began to see more details. Tall structures, wide plains, and a giant cracked surface that looked like the planet had suffered massive destruction. The colors were dark, almost burnt, as if something terrible had happened there. Scientists estimated that the signal had traveled for hundreds, maybe thousands of years before reaching Earth. That meant the senders could be long gone. Still, the mystery captured every human heart. Then came a shocking discovery. Hidden deep in the data, they found coordinates, numbers that pointed to a specific place in space far beyond the solar system, near a star system named Epsilon Eridani. The message wasn't just a cry for help, it included directions. It was as if someone had left a cosmic map, guiding whoever received it to their location. By now, governments could no longer ignore it. The United Nations held emergency meetings. World leaders gathered in New York to decide what to do. For the first time in history, all major nations sat at one table with a single purpose: to respond to the message. Outside, crowds filled the streets with signs that read, "Answer the call and we are not alone." The world was united by wonder. Dr. Vargas watched all of this with mixed emotions. She had started as a simple scientist searching for truth, but now she stood at the center of the biggest event in human history. She looked out at the stars from her observatory and thought about the beings who had sent that signal so long ago. Were they still alive? Did they ever imagine that one day a planet called Earth would hear them? The thought filled her with both sadness and hope. Humanity had always looked up at the sky and wondered who else might be out there. Now for the first time it seemed the sky had answered back. And in that quiet moment, as the faint beeps continued to echo from the speakers, steady, patient, and timeless, Dr. Elena Vargas made a silent promise she would find them. No matter how far, no matter how long it took, humanity would answer the call that came from the stars. Because sometimes, one signal can change the destiny of an entire world. Months had passed since the world first heard the mysterious signal from space. People had grown used to seeing it on the news, but for the scientists working under Dr. Elena Vargas, the excitement never faded. Every day they uncovered something new. In a quiet laboratory filled with computers and blinking lights, her team worked tirelessly, trying to decode the last fragments of the message. The signal still repeated every 8 hours like a heartbeat coming from the stars, and Dr. Vargas was convinced that the final part of it held the key to everything. Late one night, while most of the team had gone home, Elena sat staring at her monitor. Lines of code scrolled endlessly on the screen. Her eyes were tired, but her mind refused to rest. She felt as if someone out there was waiting for her to understand. Just then, Ravi, the young engineer who had earlier found hidden images in the signal, rushed into the room holding a tablet. "Doctor, you need to see this," he said breathlessly. On the tablet were clearer images reconstructed from the signal. The shapes were sharper now. Tall, thin structures that looked like buildings, and in one image, a huge sphere floating above a broken landscape. It looked like a planet dying. Clouds of smoke covered much of its surface, and strange glowing cracks ran across its continents. It was a haunting sight. Elena zoomed in on one of the images. There were markings, lines that almost looked like writing. She called in the linguists who began comparing them to known alphabets, but they didn't match anything from Earth. Yet the structure of the symbols seemed organized and meaningful. "This is a language," one linguist whispered. "Someone is trying to tell us something." Weeks passed, and the world's best minds joined the project. Scientists from Japan, Egypt, America, India, and dozens of other countries worked together, sharing data and theories. It was the first time in history that every major nation collaborated without politics getting in the way. The mystery of the signal had united humanity in a way wars, disasters, and even peace treaties never could. Dr. Vargas became the face of the project. News networks interviewed her daily. "Do you believe it's really a call for help?" one reporter asked. Elena smiled faintly. "I believe someone out there needed to be heard," she replied. "And we were the ones who finally listened." Soon, another part of the message was decoded. Not just images this time, but moving patterns. They looked like short video clips showing strange machines, tall spires collapsing, and bright flashes that resembled explosions. The message told a silent story of destruction. "It's like watching the end of a world," Ravi murmured one night as they studied the data. The emotional impact of the discovery spread far beyond the scientific community. People across the globe watched documentaries about the mysterious civilization. Artists created digital recreations of what the senders might have looked like. They imagined tall beings with glowing skin or mechanical limbs, standing among the ruins of their world, sending out one last desperate signal before everything was lost. But while the world imagined, the scientists kept working. Slowly, through mathematical translation, they began to interpret the message hidden in the patterns. It wasn't just random imagery. It was structured communication. There were numerical sequences, planetary diagrams, and what appeared to be star maps. And there, among those maps, they found something astonishing, a clear set of coordinates. Those coordinates pointed to a specific star system, Epsilon Eridani. It was about 10 light-years away, close enough to be reachable by future spacecraft. The message was no longer a mystery. It was a plea for help, and it included directions. When the coordinates were confirmed, the world exploded with emotion. People cried, cheered, and prayed. It was official. Another intelligent civilization had once existed out there, and they had reached out to Earth. The United Nations called for an emergency global summit. For the first time, leaders of every major nation gathered not to discuss war or trade, but to decide how humanity should respond to a voice from the stars. The meeting was broadcast live. Millions of people watched from their homes as scientists, politicians, and religious leaders debated. Some were filled with fear. "What if it's a trap?" one delegate warned. "What if whoever sent it is dangerous?" Others spoke with hope. "If someone once asked for help," said a scientist from Japan, "then they were like us, vulnerable, alive, and desperate to survive. We cannot turn away." Dr. Vargas stood before the assembly, her heart pounding. She wasn't a politician, but the world wanted to hear her voice. "When a ship is lost at sea and sends a distress call," she said calmly, "we don't ignore it. We respond, we help. That's what defines humanity. This signal, this message, and it's a test of who we are." Her words touched millions. After weeks of debate, the United Nations passed a historic resolution. Humanity would prepare to send a response. The Global Deep Space Response Initiative was reborn as something bigger, Project Skyward. Its goal was simple but extraordinary, to send a message back and eventually to reach the source. The announcement changed the world overnight. Scientists began working on powerful transmitters capable of sending signals across light years. Engineers started designing new spacecraft that could travel farther than anything before. Students in schools were inspired to study astronomy and engineering. Hope filled the air. Yet, as the excitement grew, there were also fears. Some people believed humanity should remain silent. "We don't know who or what is out there," said one famous philosopher. "Maybe the ones who destroyed that world could destroy ours too." Conspiracy groups spread panic, claiming the message came from hostile beings or ancient gods. But Dr. Vargas refused to let fear take over. "The unknown has always frightened us," she said in a speech. "But it has also pushed us forward. Fire was once unknown. The sea was unknown. Space was unknown. And yet we explored them all. In the following months, global collaboration reached levels never seen before. Rival nations shared their technology. Private companies funded massive research stations in orbit. Even small communities donated resources, believing they were part of something greater than themselves. The idea of responding to the signal wasn't just scientific. It became a symbol of unity. Dr. Vargas and her team focused on refining the images from the message. The more they studied them, the clearer they became. They could now see structures that looked like energy towers and ships half buried in dust. One frame showed figures, silhouettes of tall beings standing together looking at the sky. Some believed this was the civilization that sent the signal. Others thought it was an artistic message, a way of saying we were here. Remember us. Late one night, Elena sat alone in her office, surrounded by glowing monitors. The signal continued to play softly through the speakers. She thought about those beings, what they must have felt as their world fell apart. Did they know anyone would ever hear them? Did they believe help would come? For the first time, she felt a strange connection, almost spiritual, as if the distance between Earth and that unknown planet had suddenly shrunk. "We heard you," she whispered, "and we're coming." Outside the scientific community, the world was changing too. Movies, books, and art began reflecting the new era of hope. Religious leaders reinterpreted ancient texts, saying the signal proved that life existed beyond Earth, that creation was far wider than humanity had ever imagined. Even the cynical began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the human race had a higher purpose. But there were also those who opposed the project. Massive protests broke out in several countries with banners reading, "Don't answer," and "Stay safe on Earth." People feared provoking unknown powers. Rumors spread that governments were hiding parts of the message, especially because one newly decoded segment contained what looked like an image of a giant explosion near a city on that distant world. Some said it was war. Others said it was nature. No one truly knew. Despite the growing tension, the work continued. Scientists built the largest radio array ever constructed, a massive circle of antennas stretching across deserts and plains. It would be used to send humanity's first reply. When it was complete, the whole world watched as Dr. Vargas stood before the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "To whoever sent the message," she said, "this is Earth. We heard your call. We are coming to find you." The crowd fell silent as the message was transmitted, a powerful burst of energy sent racing through the void, following the same path the original signal had traveled centuries ago. The moment marked a turning point in human history. For the first time, humanity was not just looking at the stars, it was talking to them. As days turned into weeks, people began to refer to it as the day humanity answered. The world had changed forever. Space, once a cold and distant place, now felt like a home waiting to be explored. Dr. Vargas knew it would take years, even decades, to reach the star system, but she also knew something far greater had already happened. The signal had done more than reveal another civilization. It had revealed the best in humanity. People were no longer divided by borders or beliefs. They were united by curiosity, compassion, and the dream of connection. In the glow of her office, Elena watched the stars outside the window, twinkling like tiny beacons of hope. Somewhere out there, across the endless darkness, was a world that had once called for help. Whether or not they were still alive didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that humanity had heard, and humanity had answered. For the first time in history, Earth was no longer just a planet. It was part of something far bigger. And from that moment on, everyone looked up at the night sky with a new feeling in their hearts. The sense that maybe, just maybe, humanity was finally finding its place among the stars. Years had passed since Earth had answered the mysterious signal. The message had become more than a scientific discovery. It had become a dream shared by all of humanity. For the first time in history, people no longer looked at the sky with fear or distance. They looked at it with purpose. It was the beginning of something humanity had never seen before. Nations that had once fought each other now worked side by side. Engineers, scientists, and builders from every continent were united under one mission: Project Skyward. The goal was simple yet extraordinary: to go beyond Earth to reach the stars, and to find the world that had called for help so long ago. Dr. Elena Vargas, now known as the Voice of the Stars, had become a symbol of hope. Her discovery had transformed humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. She had spent years working on the data from the original signal, helping design technologies that could one day carry people beyond the solar system. Her once small research team had grown into a massive global organization with stations in every major country. Humanity was no longer just listening to space. It was preparing to step into it. The first phase of Project Skyward began with the construction of orbiting space stations. These stations weren't like the small satellites of the past. They were enormous floating cities in the sky. Each one could house thousands of people, filled with laboratories, gardens, factories, and homes. They were designed not only to orbit Earth, but to serve as the foundation for something greater, the launch points for ships that would one day travel to distant stars. At first, people were unsure. Living in space had always sounded like a dream, something seen only in movies or books. But when the first massive structure called Aurora Station was completed, everything changed. The world watched live broadcasts as astronauts and engineers floated through wide glass corridors, looking down at the blue Earth beneath them. Humanity, one reporter said, has officially moved into the sky. Dr. Vargas stood at the control room of the International Launch Center as the first supply ships took off for Aurora Station. Her eyes filled with tears. The signal that once echoed like a lonely cry across the universe had now brought life to the skies above Earth. It was as if the message had awakened something sleeping inside humanity, a desire to explore, to connect, to become more. Soon, more stations were built. Horizon 1 over Asia, Celestia over Europe, and New Dawn orbiting above the Pacific Ocean. Each was connected by powerful communication networks and solar power grids that captured energy directly from the sun. Life in the sky became normal for some. Thousands of scientists, families, and workers began to live permanently among the stars. Children were born on these stations, the first generation of humans who would grow up without ever setting foot on Earth. At first, living in orbit was difficult. The early years were filled with challenges. Machines broke down, oxygen levels fluctuated, and food had to be carefully rationed. But humanity adapted quickly. With new technologies like fusion energy, 3D printed materials, and artificial gravity systems, the dream of space living became real. People learned to build, farm, and create entire communities floating in the dark silence of space. The view from the stations was breathtaking. From up there, Earth looked peaceful, a shining marble of blue and white. Borders and wars meant nothing. People on the stations often said they felt different, as if being so far from the surface had changed how they saw the world. They no longer thought of themselves as citizens of one country, but as part of one species. Humanity was slowly becoming what it had always been meant to be, united. But not everyone on Earth was happy. Some people believed Project Skyward was a waste of resources. We should fix our planet before trying to leave it, critics said. Environmentalists argued that while the rich moved to the sky, the poor were left behind. Governments struggled to balance the needs of Earth with the promise of the stars. Yet Dr. Vargas and her team never lost faith. "We are not abandoning Earth," she said during a global broadcast. "We are expanding it. Humanity's home is growing bigger." Years of effort finally led to the next great achievement, the building of the Odyssey fleet, a group of interstellar ships that would one day travel to the source of the signal. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever created. Each was several kilometers long, equipped with powerful fusion drives that could sustain life for decades. They were built in orbit piece by piece using materials mined from asteroids and the moon. The process took years, but every nation contributed. It became the most ambitious construction project in human history. People from all walks of life volunteered to work on the stations and the ships. Engineers worked in zero gravity, welding metal while floating in spacesuits. Farmers tended hydroponic gardens that glowed green under artificial sunlight. Teachers gave lessons to children in transparent classrooms overlooking Earth. It was hard work, but everyone knew they were part of something far greater than themselves. Dr. Vargas often visited the space stations to see the progress firsthand. She loved talking to the people who had chosen to live in the sky. One day she met a little girl born on Aurora Station who told her, "I've never seen rain, but I've seen the sunrise from space." Elena smiled, realizing how much the world had changed. Humanity was no longer just a species bound to one planet. It had become a civilization among the stars. By 2050, Earth's skies were alive with human activity. The darkness above the planet now glittered with hundreds of stations, ships, and floating cities. From the surface, people could sometimes see the stations shining brightly like moving stars. Poets called it the new constellation. Humanity had truly risen into the heavens. Still, the dream of reaching the origin of the signal remained the ultimate goal. The coordinates from the mysterious message were carefully studied, and navigation routes were mapped out. Scientists estimated it would take decades, even with advanced propulsion, to reach the distant star system. But no one was discouraged. Humanity had already done the impossible, turning the dream of living in space into reality. As preparations for the first deep space mission began, Dr. Vargas was chosen as the chief scientific advisor. Though she was older now, her energy and determination were stronger than ever. She often stood by the large observation window of the Aurora station, watching the construction of the Odyssey 1, the flagship of the fleet. Its massive silver hull reflected sunlight like a star itself. It would be the ship to lead humanity's journey beyond the solar system. Life on Earth also began to change. With so many resources and industries moved to orbit, pollution levels dropped. Space mining provided materials that once required damaging Earth's environment. The sky cities produced clean energy, which was sent back down to Earth using giant microwave transmitters. Slowly, the planet began to heal. People realized that Project Skyward wasn't just about leaving, it was about saving both Earth and humanity. The excitement reached its peak when the launch date for the Odyssey fleet was announced. Billions of people tuned in to watch the historic event. The fleet would not depart immediately. It would first move into a high orbit around the moon where final preparations would take place. Still, the idea that humans were about to leave the solar system filled everyone with pride and wonder. The night before the first ship launched, Dr. Vargas couldn't sleep. She floated in her quarters looking out at the endless stars. She thought about how far humanity had come, from hearing a faint signal in the dark to building entire worlds in the sky. The journey ahead would be long, but she felt peace. "We answered the call," she whispered to herself. "Now we go to find its source." When the engines of the Odyssey 1 ignited, the entire sky lit up. Streams of light shot across the darkness as the giant ship slowly moved away from Earth. People on the surface watched through telescopes and giant screens, many with tears in their eyes. Children pointed at the bright streak in the sky and shouted, "There they go!" It was more than a technological achievement. It was a rebirth of the human spirit. The message from the stars had begun as a mystery, a faint cry from a distant world. But now it had become the reason for humanity's greatest transformation. The people who once lived under the sky now lived within it. The world that once feared the unknown was now embracing it, and as the Odyssey fleet drifted silently through the vast darkness, its lights twinkling like a new constellation, the people of Earth realized that they were no longer just inhabitants of one planet. They were explorers, dreamers, and builders of the sky. Dr. Elena Vargas watched the departing ships with a heart full of pride and wonder. The voice from the stars had changed everything. It had given humanity a new direction, a new purpose, and a new home among the heavens. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of the signal. It was never just a call for help, it was an invitation. And humanity had finally accepted it. The year was 2062 when humanity finally began its greatest journey. The Odyssey fleet, a collection of massive interstellar ships, was ready to leave the safety of Earth's orbit. It had taken decades of work, sacrifice, and unity to reach this point. People across the world watched with tears in their eyes as the ships prepared to depart. For centuries, humans had only dreamed of touching the stars, but now they were becoming part of them. Dr. Elena Vargas stood inside the main observation deck of Odyssey 1, the lead ship. Her face was calm, but her heart beat fast with emotion. She had spent her entire life chasing the mystery of the help signal, and now she was part of the mission to follow it. Outside the window stretched a sea of stars. Billions of lights scattered across the darkness, calling to her. "We're finally coming," she whispered softly, as if speaking to the unknown beings who had sent the signal so long ago. The engines of the Odyssey fleet roared to life. Fusion cores glowed with bright blue light, and the ships began to move slowly away from the orbiting stations that surrounded Earth. From below, billions of people watched the live broadcast. There was silence across cities and villages alike. No wars, no borders, no divisions, just one shared moment of pride. Humanity had taken its first step into the deep unknown. As the ships accelerated, Earth began to shrink in the windows behind them. The blue oceans, white clouds, and green lands became a distant ball of light, glowing in the vast emptiness. Many of the passengers cried quietly, realizing they might never see their home again. Others looked forward with excitement and curiosity, eager to build new lives among the stars. The journey ahead was long. Even with advanced propulsion, it would take years to reach the star system from which the signal had come. The ships were designed to be self-sustaining like floating cities. They carried hydroponic farms, recycling systems, and vast libraries of knowledge. Thousands of people lived aboard: scientists, engineers, doctors, families, even artists and teachers. This wasn't just a mission to find another world. It was the next chapter of human civilization. Life on the ship soon developed its own rhythm. Every morning, artificial lights brightened to mimic sunrise. People gathered in communal areas for meals, while children studied in classrooms where windows showed endless stars. Gardens grew under glowing lamps, filling the air with the fresh smell of plants. Music and laughter echoed through the corridors. Humanity had not only survived, it had adapted beautifully to life in space. Dr. Vargas spent most of her days studying the navigation data. The fleet followed the coordinates embedded in the ancient signal, adjusting its course as new discoveries were made. The deeper they traveled, the more distant the sun became until it was just one small point among billions. For many young passengers born in orbit, the sun was only a story their parents told them. Their true home was the fleet, the shining metal world drifting through the stars. As time passed, the crew began to encounter new phenomena, things humanity had never seen before. They passed through glowing nebulae that painted their windows in colors of violet and blue. They saw comets the size of mountains, ice crystals sparkling in the dark. Once the ships had to maneuver through a field of asteroid fragments that moved like silent storms. The sight was terrifying yet magnificent. Humanity had entered a universe full of wonder and danger, but with beauty came challenges. 1 year into the journey, Odyssey 3 suffered a systems failure after being hit by a micrometeorite shower. Alarms echoed through the fleet. Engineers worked without rest to repair the damage, and for a moment fear returned. The fear that one small mistake could end everything. But the people pulled together. They had become a family, connected not by nationality or language, but by the same dream. After days of repairs, the ship's engines roared back to life and cheers filled the intercom. Humanity had faced its first great test in the stars, and survived. As years passed, the mission began to change people in ways no one expected. Living in the silence of space made them think differently. They no longer argued about Earth's politics or religions. Instead, they spoke about the future, the kind of world they wanted to build when they reached their destination. The children growing up on the ships were different too. They moved gracefully in low gravity, their bodies stronger and lighter. They had never known fear of the unknown. For them, space was home. Dr. Vargas noticed these changes with fascination. She realized humanity was slowly evolving, not just physically but mentally. The people of Earth were turning into something new, spaceborne humans, children of the stars. They had left behind old habits of division and greed. In the vast emptiness of the universe, they had learned the value of cooperation, patience, and hope. Sometimes, when nights were quiet, Elena would sit by the observation window, listening to the faint hum of the engines. Outside, the stars shimmered endlessly. She thought about the beings who had sent the signal. Had they also once looked out at their own sky, wondering if someone would come for them? Were they still alive, or had time erased them? She often spoke softly to the stars, as if continuing an ancient conversation. "We heard you. We're coming." 5 years into the journey, something unexpected happened. The fleet's long-range scanners detected another signal, faint, weak, and similar to the one that had started everything. At first, people thought it was just interference. But as they decoded it, they realized it carried a message, shorter, simpler, but unmistakably from the same source. It was another distress call. Excitement and fear spread through the fleet. Could it mean that someone was still alive out there? Or was it just an old echo, a ghost from the past? Dr. Vargas immediately ordered all ships to adjust their course slightly toward the direction of the new signal. It was weaker, fading fast, but they followed it with determination. Weeks passed, and the signal grew stronger. The crew watched as strange new stars filled their maps. Everyone aboard could feel it, the sense that they were close to something extraordinary. Then one night, as the fleet passed through a dense dust cloud, the signal suddenly stopped. There was only silence. The disappointment was heavy, but Dr. Vargas refused to give up. "If the message stopped," she said, "it means we're close. The source might be near." Her confidence gave everyone hope again. Another year went by and life continued aboard the ships. Humans celebrated birthdays, held weddings, and even wrote songs about the stars. The Odyssey fleet had become a true civilization, floating through the galaxy with its own culture and traditions. People began to refer to themselves as Skyborn. It wasn't just a name, it was an identity. By the 10th year of the journey, the fleet had traveled farther than any human object in history. The nearest star systems were now familiar landmarks. The crew had mapped uncharted regions, discovering new planets and strange cosmic phenomena. They even found one world covered entirely in shimmering ice, where light bent in beautiful rainbow patterns. Yet, despite all these discoveries, Dr. Vargas never forgot their mission. Every night she returned to the same window and whispered the same words. "We're still coming." The signal that had started everything was more than just a message. It had become humanity's guiding light, a symbol of purpose and unity. One evening, as the fleet drifted past a cluster of stars, the crew noticed something extraordinary on their monitors. A faint glimmer ahead, not from a star but from a distant metallic structure. It was enormous and shaped like a ring floating in the darkness. The computers detected artificial materials, proof that it was built, not natural. A murmur of awe filled the control rooms. Could this be them? Someone whispered. The ship slowed as they approached the mysterious ring. It was ancient and silent, covered in dust and scars of time. Dr. Vargas stared at it, her heart pounding. "It's a gateway," she said softly. "Maybe they used it to send their signal." The discovery reignited hope across the fleet. Humanity wasn't just exploring now. They were touching the remains of another civilization. Engineers sent drones to scan the structure, and what they found confirmed everyone's suspicions. It was a communication device, enormous in scale, capable of sending messages across galaxies. The help signal they had received centuries earlier had likely come from this very structure. But the builders, the ones who had sent it, were nowhere to be found. Dr. Vargas stood before the massive ring, her reflection shimmering in the ship's glass. "You called for help," she whispered, "and though you may be gone, your voice changed us forever." She realized that the journey itself had been the true purpose. The signal had united humanity, teaching them compassion, patience, and courage. As the fleet prepared to move forward again, the people aboard looked out into the endless sky with new understanding. They were no longer just travelers, they were inheritors of a cosmic legacy. The help signal had not only pulled them toward the stars, it had transformed them into something greater. Humanity had left Earth to save another world, but in doing so, it had saved itself. Now in the quiet glow of distant suns, the children of Earth, the Skyborn, continued their journey, not as explorers of one planet, but as the guardians of all worlds yet to come. The Odyssey fleet floated silently near the giant ring structure, surrounded by the endless black of space. The people aboard the ship stared at the ancient creation with awe and confusion. It was larger than anything humans had ever built, so massive that the entire fleet could fit through its center. The metallic surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the distant light of stars. It looked like a sleeping giant, ancient and powerful, waiting for someone to wake it up. Dr. Elena Vargas stood in the control room, her eyes fixed on the data screens. Her heart was full of questions. Who had built this? Where had they gone? And what had happened to them after sending that desperate call for help? She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Humanity had traveled farther than anyone could imagine, all because of that one signal. And now they stood before the truth, or at least a part of it. For days, the engineers studied the ring. Drones scanned its surface, sending back streams of information. The structure seemed dead, without power or movement, but deep inside they found traces of energy, faint and unstable, as if something inside was still trying to stay alive. It was like a heartbeat that had slowed almost to silence. Dr. Vargas ordered the ships to stay in orbit around the ring while her team continued the research. She barely slept, spending long nights in the laboratory. Sometimes she would stare at the holographic model of the structure, and imagine what kind of beings had built it. Were they like humans, full of hope and fear, or were they something completely different, beyond human understanding? One night, as she worked alone, the lights in the lab flickered. The screens glitched for a second, then displayed a strange symbol, an unfamiliar pattern of circles and lines. Dr. Vargas frowned and leaned closer. It wasn't a system error. It was a message. Her heart skipped a beat. She immediately called the engineering team to verify it. The same pattern appeared on their instruments too. The ring had just sent out a pulse of energy. It was weak but intelligent. Something inside it had awakened. The fleet went into alert mode. Crews rushed to their stations. Outside, faint lights began to appear on the surface of the ring, spreading like veins of fire across the metal. The structure came alive, humming softly, glowing with a golden light. For the first time in thousands of years, it was awake again. The people aboard the ships watched in stunned silence. "Is it dangerous?" one officer asked. Dr. Vargas shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. It's responding to us. Maybe it recognizes our presence." As the glow brightened, the pattern on the ring shifted, forming what looked like symbols or words. The computers tried to translate them, but the language was far too complex. It didn't match any known system of communication, yet there was something familiar about it, something that felt almost human. Dr. Vargas stared at the screen. "It's trying to talk to us," she whispered. Over the next few days, the fleet worked tirelessly to decode the message. Using AI systems and old linguistic models, they slowly began to understand fragments of the transmission. It spoke of a civilization that had once thrived among the stars, a race of beings who had explored far and wide, searching for others like them. They had sent out help signals not because of war, but because of a dying sun. Their world was collapsing, and they had hoped someone out there would hear their cry. But no one had come. Their message had traveled for ages through the emptiness until it reached Earth. And now, centuries later, humanity had answered. The discovery moved everyone deeply. People cried when they realized the truth. The beings who had sent the signal were long gone. Their world lost to time, but their message had lived on. It had become the spark that pushed humanity to unite, to grow, to rise beyond Earth. They had not saved the senders, but in following their voice, they had saved themselves. Dr. Vargas stood before the ring again, feeling both sorrow and gratitude. "You were not forgotten," she said softly. We came for you." Suddenly, the ring pulsed again, brighter than before. A powerful wave of energy surrounded the fleet, making the ships tremble. Alarm lights flashed everywhere, but before panic could spread, the wave stabilized. A vast projection appeared in front of the ring, a glowing image made of light. It showed a world filled with oceans, forests, and strange crystal-like towers. A voice echoed in everyone's minds, soft and melodic. It wasn't in words, but in feelings. Warmth, peace, welcome. The scientists quickly realized what was happening. The ring was transmitting stored memories. It was showing them the home of the beings who had once lived there. The holographic world rotated slowly in space, revealing mountains of glass, rivers of light, and a sky filled with twin suns. It was breathtaking. Dr. Vargas felt tears in her eyes. "It's their world," she said quietly. "They wanted us to see it." The projection continued for hours, showing scenes of life, families, cities, music, and art. It was as if the lost civilization had left behind a message of beauty rather than sorrow. When the vision ended, the ring dimmed again, its light fading to a soft glow. For several days, the fleet remained near the structure, studying and reflecting. The discovery changed the way people thought about everything. Humanity realized that the universe was not empty. It was full of stories waiting to be found. The help signal had not been just a call for rescue. It had been a bridge between two civilizations, separated by time but connected by hope. Dr. Vargas gathered the leaders of the fleet and spoke to them in the main hall. "We came searching for others," she said, "and we found their legacy. We owe it to them and to ourselves to continue this journey. There are more worlds out there, more voices waiting to be heard. We can't stop here," the council agreed. A new decision was made. The Odyssey fleet would not return to Earth. Instead, they would continue deeper into space, exploring and searching for life. Earth had given them birth, but the stars had given them purpose. Soon, preparations began for the next stage of their journey. They left a monument near the ring, a shining orb engraved with words in every human language. To those who called for help, you were heard. Your message lives in us. It was humanity's promise that the memory of the lost civilization would never fade. As the ships began to move again, people gathered by the windows to watch the ring fade into the distance. It stood silently among the stars, a symbol of the past and a reminder of what had brought them there. The fleet drifted forward, engines glowing like new suns. Dr. Vargas stayed by the observation deck as usual. The stars stretched before her, endless and mysterious. She thought about how far they had come, from the blue skies of Earth to the black ocean of the cosmos. Humanity had changed forever. No longer were they creatures of one small planet. They were travelers of infinity. In the following years, the fleet discovered new systems and planets. Some were barren, others full of life. On one world, they found simple organisms swimming in crystal lakes. On another, they saw vast fields of light that moved like living waves. Every discovery reminded them that the universe was alive and waiting to be understood. The children born aboard the ships grew up hearing stories of Earth and the signal. They called Dr. Vargas the listener, the one who had heard the voice of the stars. She grew older, her hair turning silver, but her spirit remained bright. She often said, "We are the answer to their call, and one day someone will answer ours." On the 20th anniversary of the journey, the fleet held a grand celebration. They turned off all the lights in the ships and opened every viewing window. Outside, millions of stars shone brighter than ever. People sang, laughed, and held hands, celebrating not just survival but unity and discovery. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't just living, they were thriving among the stars. That night, as the celebration faded, Dr. Vargas stood alone, looking at the endless sky. Suddenly, her communication panel lit up. It wasn't an alarm or a system check. It was a signal, faint, distant, but real. Her heart stopped for a second. She listened carefully. It was not the same as before, but it carried a similar rhythm, the same pulse of intelligence. Another call, another voice in the dark. She smiled softly. "So we're not alone after all," she whispered. She sent a message to the fleet. "Prepare to adjust course. We have a new signal. Someone out there is calling for us." And so the Odyssey fleet turned toward the unknown once more. Humanity continued its journey across the stars, chasing voices, building bridges between worlds. The people who once lived under one blue sky were now part of a vast, glittering universe, no longer bound to Earth but forever connected to the sky. They had left to answer one call for help. But now they were the hope others waited for. The children of Earth had become the guardians of the galaxy, carrying light into the endless night, proving that no message, no matter how distant, ever truly goes unheard.